Woke up. Clock says 3:34 a.m. I'm 17 and in my bedroom it's pitch black, but I hear some rattling downstairs. Terrified, I quietly tiptoe to my parents' room. Weird, it's empty. Where are my parents at 3:34 a.m.? Go upstairs to my brother's room. He's usually awake all night, but while the light is on, no one is in the room. So I guess whatever those noises are downstairs, it must be them. Why are they awake? Maybe someone died. I go downstairs. In the middle of my living room is what looks like two men stealing our TV. No one else is in sight. I run upstairs as quietly as possible, shut and lock my door. Suddenly there's banging on the door. I wake up. It was a dream, and the relief washes over me. I look over at the clock. Weird coincidence, it's 3:34 a.m. I'm shaking, but decide to go downstairs to prove to myself that everything's fine. I go downstairs. The two men are in my kitchen screaming at my parents and brother. I run upstairs to my bedroom and lock the door. 10 seconds later, I hear banging. I woke up. It's 3:34 a.m. This time I had actually woken up and I don't manage to fall back asleep for about 36 hours. Edit. Lots of responses about lucid dreaming here. I spent most of my teens and early 20s as a lucid dreamer, discovering the techniques after a childhood plowed by very frightening sleep paralyses. I found a message board back in 1998 where I learned to at least have fun with it. The above story wasn't a sleep paralysis experience, but it was typical of the kinds of nightmares I used to have. Weirdly enough, I rarely have nested dreams anymore, and haven't had a successful attempt at lucid dreaming in a few years. My guess is that it has something to do with hormones. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit, and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. Police who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive, and it got dark, and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me in not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry. I had disturbed his resting place and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time and no doubt will be tonight after typing this. I lived in a bizarre little house as a child. It was incredibly tall and thin, like an attached house except freestanding, with 3 floors, a basement, and an attic. It was full of quirks, such as 2 fully functional fireplaces, a shower stall in the center of the basement, a backyard so small that you could not take 5 paces without hitting the fence, and an old-timey rope-pull dumbwaiter that led from the kitchen to my bedroom. I loved that weird little place, but unfortunately, it was incredibly old, and half of its charm was the fact that it seemed to have been designed by an inarticulate conclave of lunatics. And eventually the repair costs exceeded what my parents were willing to sink into it, and we had to move. It was a chore. I packed most of my stuff myself, and I had taken to throwing stuff down the dumbwaiter and shoving all my clothes so thickly in my closet that they became a single solid brick of fabric. While clearing that closet out, in fact, I came across a feature I hadn't noticed before. An attic entrance in the roof. Being an adventurous kid, I opened her up, stood on the clothes brick, and began my first and last exploration into the topmost part of our weird little house. The third thing was the bones. There were a lot of bones. I was a kid at the time with a limited understanding of anatomy, but there were bones of all types heaped into a series of piles around the center of the attic. Small and large, clean and white, from every and any imaginable sort of creature. Haphazardly stacked in a half-dozen osseous clumps. 2 of them were blackened, as if someone had tried to burn them, and the walls nearest those blackened piles were scrawled in dark bone char messages. Mostly they were just smears, but the word sorry appeared more than once. That room had been sitting over my head for 8 years while I slept. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead, but it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you." And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down me street and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a fucking cunt and he was going to kill me and all that. I live right off the corner and I didn't want him to figure that out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my fucking front stoop staring out at the street like the motherfucker knew I lived there. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Edit. The guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in that area, unfortunately, downtown of a medium-sized city. So if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass, otherwise I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. 4 years ago, I lived in a very large farmhouse that was converted into 2 apartments. The house was known as the Old Boys Home. It was used to house boys with behavioral issues but was closed due to allegations of molestation. Anyway, I was living with my boyfriend and my 3-year-old daughter at the time. My bedroom had a large fireplace that had been boarded up and painted over. I decided to push my bed up against it one day while I was rearranging things. It was like a headboard. That night, around 1 a.m., I had heard a small voice saying, "Mom? Mom? Mommy?" I'd sat up in bed but didn't see anything, so I reached over my boyfriend trying to grab my daughter and put her in our bed. I kept feeling around and I was still hearing the voice, but I couldn't feel her. My boyfriend woke up and turned the bedside lamp on, asking me, "What the hell are you doing?" I explained that Amelia was trying to get in our bed and I was reaching for her. There was nobody there. My daughter was sound asleep in her room. Then the next night came. Around 1 a.m. again, my dog had started to whimper at outdoors, so my boyfriend got up to take him outside. You know that feeling in a bed when someone lies down next to you, where the bed pushes in and there is a warmth in your back? I felt that, so I assumed my boyfriend had come back to bed. I rolled over. My boyfriend wasn't in the bed, and I felt the fucking bed release pressure. Whatever was laying next to me has gotten up in that second. I moved my bed the next day to the other side of the room, and I never had another incident in the 2 years I remained in that house. I was about 4 or 5 years old and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open her room, which was directly behind the bed, above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. Her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and wake her up. In the 3-4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up in the door frame, and there was a man standing by my open door making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with a deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. I'm a girl and I live in a pretty big old house with 5 Navy guys. My room is by itself out in the detached garage. So one night I'm sleeping out there, and in my dream, I assume, I'm hearing this loud rattling noise. I slowly start waking up, but I feel pretty out of it. I open my eyes and look around and the noise continues. The door is about 3 feet from the end of my bed, and the door knob is rattling like crazy. It almost sounds like someone is pounding on it, but I can't tell if it's someone knocking or someone just trying to open it. At this point, I realize I'm really awake and this is not a dream. Even my lab, who never wakes up during the night, is up and staring at the door. I often used to forget to lock my door because we live in what seems like a pretty quiet neighborhood, but thankfully I'd begun deadbolting it more regularly, maybe like a week before. Probably due to something I read on Reddit I don't remember. I am terrified. I always hoped I'd be one of those people who responded better in a situation like this, but I was not. The door is still rattling, and I can see the motion light is on and shining through the window in my closet. All my blinds are closed. I am near tears, and I throw the blanket over my head and wait to die. I have literally nothing in my room that I could defend myself with except a flashlight, which I am holding onto tightly. I am paralyzed with fear, and just sit there as silently as I can, curled up in the fetal position with my metal flashlight. A minute later, the noise stops and I finally am able to move. I have a weird closet with a window at the top and a big bench, so I crawl in there, climb up on the bench, and poke my head up. A few seconds after that, the motion light goes out. I'd missed whatever was going on. I run back to my bed and begin thinking logically. I live with 5 guys. They often have people over late at night after going out downtown. I look at my watch and it's 2:30. About the time they'd get home from bars closing. Maybe someone was very intoxicated and just being stupid. Right? So I text all my roommates, trying not to make a big deal of it and sound silly. Hey guys, are you up? Do you have people over? Someone was just outside my door trying to get in. I assume someone must be drunk or something. Kinda creepy. Less than 2 minutes after that, I hear the back door to the main house swing open. I hear whistling and banging, and my roommates are running around the backyard with baseball bats. Thankfully, one of them is a light sleeper, and he woke up and got another guy up. I open the door, run inside with my dog, and don't go to sleep again that night. My roommates spent the next couple hours patrolling the house and watching out the windows. We never saw anyone, but they did find a pack of cigarettes lying in our backyard, along with a bag of Hardee's or something like that. More than likely, it was just someone trying to rob us. And because there were 6 cars in the driveway, they decided to go for the garage where they probably assumed no one was, and not the house where they'd probably get themselves killed. However, at the time, for all I knew, all my roommates had already been murdered, and I was the last one to go. That's what I figured at the time anyway.